Hello, John here. So it's, as you can hear, it's pouring rain like crazy. So I'm not going to the mountain today to record this video. I'm here on my back balcony in beautiful Plateau Montréal. It's yeah, it's really raining. It's quite beautiful actually. So today I want to talk about the whole idea of the one, right? The one, as in Plato's Symposium, Aristophanes says that you have to find your soulmate, and it's this, incredibly romantic idea that there is one person out there that's going to complete you, that is the one for you, right? And Daniel Sloss, in his hilarious comedy special called Jigsaw, he talks about his father telling him a version of Aristophanes' idea when he was a kid, and said, you just have to find that one person that fits you perfectly, and that'll complete your life, right? And he says, your mother was that for me. And Daniel Sloss says, I knew right then that this was not going to be my path. I'm very happy that that was, the situation my parents had, that they found each other, and I'm glad that they complete each other in that kind of soulmate way. But he said, this is not going to be for me. But I think better than thinking about the one, I think if you literally believed in the one, then that would lead to all sorts of logical problems that you'd almost need like the medieval scholastics to figure out. So like, what if your soulmate happens to be born in northern China and speaks in some random rural province in northern China, and what if they don't speak any of the languages that you happen to speak, English, French, Arabic, Italian, whatever languages you speak? So how are you going to meet this person, right? And what if your soulmate is a different age than you are, right? Like, what if your soulmate is like a 90-year-old man that's like wasting away in an old folks home somewhere, and you're 20 years old? Like, ugh, sketch, So obviously, the idea of the one in a very literal sense is ridiculous. But I don't think it's entirely without some kind of merit, right? I think it's good to think about, rather than the one, to think about the ones, right? So I would say at any given time, there is a particular number. There's no way we would have to, like, maybe if we had that machine, right, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right, that can tell you the total number. The answer to the universe is 42, and the number of people that you could potentially have a happy life with right at this moment is 1,978, right, or whatever, right? Now if you can find one of those people, then you'll be good, right? That's crazy, but I think it's actually, if there was a way to figure out that information, it would be something like that, right? At any given time, depending upon a number of different factors. Some of them are really basic. So obviously, sexual orientation is a big one, right? So if you're straight, well, then that automatically sort of means that half of humanity is not going to be potentially somebody that you're going to fall in love with, right, in a powerful way. If you're homosexual, then if you're a gay guy or you're a lesbian, you're going to find true love in another guy or in a woman. I guess if you're if you're bisexual, you've got, at least theoretically speaking, more options. But so obviously sexual orientation is one limiting factor. Other limiting factors are way more important and much more kind of just practical. So your age, right? People tend to fall in love with somebody who's I mean, there's exceptions, obviously, but people tend to fall in love with somebody who is uh, roughly the same age as they are. I mean, if I look at my personal experience, right, with love, the vast majority of the people that, well, it's not a large number. It's a pretty small number, but the loves of my life have all been, I think, within a year or two of my age, right? So I mean, so age is a big factor. Geography is a big factor. You have immediacy, right? So the people that you're going to end up with, usually are people that live in the same area as you, or you interact with them, right? That's usually going to be a limiting factor, right? There's other things, right, when you're sort of establishing who the ones might be, right? There's other more squishy categories, right? You talk about things like personality, things like energy level, values, religion, right? This is a very difficult topic, right? Now, I happen to believe, I didn't always believe this. I came around to this position probably, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure when I came around to it. Maybe at some point in my mid 30s, just by looking at what I saw around me, is that when it comes to something like religion, for instance, I think if you meet somebody and you're really kind of falling in love with that person and you're deciding about whether you're going to get married and settle down and make a life together, I think that if one of the people involved takes religion really seriously, I mean, if both of you just think religion's a bunch of bullshit, well then, yeah, you don't have a problem. That's fine. But if one person does take it very, let's say one of you is Jewish and takes your Judaism very seriously, or one of you is Catholic, or Sunni Muslim, or whatever, really. If one person takes it really seriously, and or their family takes it really seriously, I think actually the right thing to do in that situation is to convert, right? Now, once again, I recognize that this is the kind of unfashionable position at the moment, but one of the things that I really liked about that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, is a fantastic movie. I love the fact that that the male lead in the movie, the couple, they fall in love. She's Greek Orthodox, and he's not. And he recognizes that religion's not very important to his family. It's not particularly important to him, but he loves her, and he wants to be with her forever. And so he converts. He gets baptized. He becomes a full member of Team Greek Orthodox, and I just love that part of the movie. I think it sort of sends all the right messages. It's a really good. You can see from the start that this is going to be a relationship that has a good chance of actually working out, because from the beginning, and if you haven't seen the movie, you have to see it. It's hilarious. But you can see from the start that both of them are willing to make compromises in order to make the relationship work, and compromises in order to demonstrate that they just have the right attitude towards the relationship from the get-go, right? Because if you go into a relationship, and I know plenty of friends of mine who've gone into a relationship, I must confess, I think I've probably done the same thing in the past, right? Where you go into a relationship with this kind of petulant adolescent attitude, like, you're not the boss of me, like you're not gonna tell me what to do, and you're just constantly, you're sort of like a libertarian, like within your marriage. You're just constantly trying to assert control and prevent yourself from being dominated by tyrants. Maybe that's a good attitude to have towards the federal government or towards the police, but it's a really toxic attitude to have towards your wife or your husband or your partner. I mean, it's just a shitty attitude. Like if you go in with that, I mean, sure, are there controlling people? Yeah, I definitely. I mean, oh yeah, I definitely know there are definitely some like very controlling, abusive people in this world. Uh, but chances are you're not with somebody like that. You're just with a normal person who's, wants to do different shit than you want to do, and you're gonna have to compromise, and that means you're not gonna be able to get your way all the time, and that's hard. I mean, that's hard in absolutely any relationship. But I think there's this plot device that we've been sort of bathed in for a long time. It's a plot device from Romeo and Juliet and Shakespeare. You see it in a lot of romantic comedies, and I understand why it's used, because it's a really effective plot device where you have these two people who are from totally different backgrounds, and they love conquers all, and they get together, and the conflict is great for if you're a writer, because it gives you all sorts of material that you can work with. So I get why writers use it, but in real life, it's usually not like that. In real life, as Stephen Marsh points out in his podcast, he has an episode that's all devoted to mixed marriages. Very, very good episode. One of the best episodes in the whole series, actually. And he points out, from the get-go in that episode, that if you look at the numbers, people who enter into mixed marriages are far more likely, I think it was 3 or 4 times more likely to end up divorced than people who come from the same tradition, right? Now, what I see, with that, I mean, I don't think that's, looking at those numbers, I don't think that's a reason, not to marry somebody who's from a different tradition. I would never say that. What I would say is that when you look at those numbers, what they say is that you should really take those differences seriously, and don't just imagine that everything's going to work out smoothly like they do in a romantic comedy, before the credits go up, right? So, that's why I would say, if there's a difference in religious background, I think probably most of the time the wisest course is for one of you to convert, so that, 'cause there's so many things that you're gonna fight about in a relationship. It's like there's so many compromises and conflicts you're gonna have that are totally unavoidable, right? So if you can at least be on the same team, on the same page on some of these basic issues, like how are the kids going to be raised, right? Are they going to be raised in the Jewish tradition? Are they going to go to Sunday school? Are we going to raise them atheists? Are we going to how are we going to take it? You should be on the same page with those things, because you're going to have enough stuff to argue about already. I think in real life, opposites definitely attract with some regularity, but I don't think they stay together as often. I think opposites attract, and then they eventually drive each other crazy. I think the more that you have in common with somebody else from the get-go, in terms of values and how you like to spend your time, what you like to, I think that all is like really, really helpful. Right? But anyway, now I think, going back to Aristophanes and the whole idea of a soulmate and the one, I think there's actually a way to sort of rehabilitate Aristophanes' conception of the one, and see it as being actually true in some instance, and that is with long-term marriage. Right now, I don't think that the one exists for you out there somewhere, but I do think the ones exist for you, right? And that is, like, there's sort of a group of people, and that number depends on, as I said, on so many different things. It also depends on how easygoing you are, how high maintenance you are, there's tons of factors. But there is a number, let's say a hypothetical number X, right, of people that if you met up with one of them, you could potentially have a wonderful life with that person, a wonderful relationship with that person. But once you pick one of the ones and you stick with that person and you build a life together and you go through all sorts of experiences and all sorts of struggles and all sorts of wonderful joys, and maybe you have some like kids together and you have pets together, and those pets get old and die, and your parents get old and get sick, and you go through all these things with each other, right? Gradually over time, I believe that although that person in the beginning was just one of the ones, I think they eventually become the one. But what makes them become the one is shared history, commitment, promise keeping, struggle, pain, suffering, all of that stuff. Because the thing about the past is that it happened, right? History happened. It can't be undone. It can't be redone. We only get a certain amount of history in this life, right? So if you're lucky, maybe you get 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, but we don't have that much time. So if you spend 10, 20, 30 years of your life, of your limited amount of time with this other person, eventually they become the one, and eventually they become totally irreplaceable, because nobody could possibly replace all of that history that you have with them, right? And all of those shared experiences and right. So you have this kind of wonderful camaraderie, which is not at all possible. So if you were to, theoretically speaking, I was talking with a friend of mine about this yesterday. So we were talking about this idea, and I told him what my theory of kind of the one was, and he says, well, what if you meet one of the ones, and you get into a relationship with them, and then a couple years later you meet another one of the ones, right? Then what happens, right? Well, I would say at that point, if they actually are well suited to you, if they actually are one of the ones, you will have built up some shared history with that person that you've actually been with, to such an extent that this other person who perhaps in an alternate universe could potentially be a really good fit for you is no longer, because of this. So if you find one of the ones, stick together through thick and thin, and he will become your soulmate. She will become the one. All right, bye.